So, good morning, English 149. This is Grant, and happy end of our second week. I hope you have found it enlightening. We did go over quite a few different things, but I hope that you kind of see that it's all interconnected, right? Copyright, what you can use in media, what you can't, how do you remix it, and then how do you start creating media. So again, your first feeder is due tonight, and don't, take too much time making it perfect, but I do want you to think about composition and your audience. So if you look on the podcast and the website, you'll see the rhetorical chart. Now, the rhetorical chart is really helpful for thinking about writing, like who your audience is and what is your situation often determines how you're going to write, right? Like when we're going to go through some book covers and YouTube videos, right? It depends on who your audience is and to what the aesthetics are, right? There's a very different aesthetic from like a YouTuber that vlogs every day from like a academic YouTuber, if that makes sense. So please make sure that you turn it in to either the Dropbox or turn in feeder on the website. Please email me if you have any questions, but try to get it done tonight so you can enjoy your weekend. And then I'll be back at it on Monday. Okay, so I want to get into reading different types of what we would call covers. Now, I do book covers for a reason. There's kind of a legitimacy to book covers that I think gives fan fiction some weight. So if you look here, you're going to see the YouTube videos for today, July the 2nd, that are trending. And you look at the covers, and there's nothing really anything eye-grabbing about it, right? A lot of these videos already have quite a bit of users. If there's a new music video that drops, it's usually at the top, right? But these covers they're not really meant to get new people interested, right? They're basically there for the subscribers and people that normally get to the video. Now, if you click on the videos, you're going to see there's a lot of hashtags. And so that's something about digital composition that we can kind of think about is what are the hashtags and metadata? So when people do a search, they can find you, right? It's not like YouTube is a bunch of images that you're selecting from like a Netflix screen, right? You're searching usually for videos or you already know the person. So metadata becomes part of this game, right? So the second YouTube videos that I want you to look at are from Peter Coffin, who is a famous YouTuber, probably before your time. He did the one where the orange, it's like his mouth becomes an orange. Anyway, if you look at his have a certain aesthetic to it, and I would say the aesthetic that he goes for is the standard YouTube aesthetic. This is when the algorithm was a little different, where it would give you some stuff on the side. Normally, it still does, but I think a lot of the times back then, that's the way that a lot of people got new videos. So they're meant to be informative and striking, and he puts himself in a lot of them to kind of, it's his channel, he's the voice, so you're coming to see him. And he tries to make something interesting in each of the covers. Now, the third one here is a philosophy YouTube station. It was actually like a store that was down the street when I lived in London, so I'm interested in theirs. You can see it's a very simple layout. It's trying to be an impactful statement with a interesting background, right? And so this is like a more I would say, clean academic work, right? The audience is very specific here. This is not your standard YouTuber, but it does have some elements of that YouTube aesthetic with the font, okay? So the 3 examples that I gave you are a way to think about how, your audience and your situation really informs the way that you compose, right? So I'm going to bring that back into fan fiction. So the first cover I want you to think about is the Stephenie Meyer Twilight cover. So you can see the cover is very impactful, right? It's simple. There's not a lot of things going on. We have 2 hands and a red apple, and it's meant to really focus your attention, right? There's this white and red being associated with blood and vampires, right? There's very subtle hints here. Where the other one is more obviously amateur made, but again, this is where I say, sometimes the blurry image can be good, like if you're mixing it in with other elements and it's kind of comedic. This looks like it's supposed to be semi-serious, but it's not. There's 2 elements at play here, but it's hard to figure out like how they interplay, right? There's not a real consistency of message here. It's like, well, I guess vampires at night in the city, right? But is that really interesting? Where, in the Stephenie Meyer, the apple represents innocence, right? It has all these other connotations. So they thought about imagery, color, all those aspects. And so this last cover, again, is an example of something more on fan fiction, right? People are going to know a specific symbol. Obviously, I think this is hearkening back to the Hunger Games and its aesthetic of cover art. And that's a way to kind of get an audience, right? Or many sci-fi covers look very similar to this. So it's trying to establish it's a part of a certain community and a certain aesthetic, right? So that's where I want to kind of go into fan fiction, right? Because fan fiction's different, right? We looked at YouTube that has a specific aesthetic. We looked at book covers, right? But if you look at, let's say Archive of Our Own, it looks like an internet message board, right? And from the last lecture, if the medium is the message, right? The medium that we're composing in feels like an internet message board, which, feels unprofessional, it feels combative, right? It doesn't feel great. And even though the content in here is wonderful, the aesthetic that it's after doesn't quite give us the weight as a book, right? Or a blog, right? There's a different aesthetic here. And one can think about medium and the message, I think I've mentioned this before, like Twitter, right? Because Twitter constrains language, it makes us simplify things, right? We have to simplify things on this cover of Archive of Our Own. So because we simplify, it becomes combative, right? Twitter is like the medium of choice to get into an argument with someone, right? So think about how that medium and that constraint affects the message, right? And so if you go into Wattpad here, right? Wattpad has the book aesthetic. So that's why in this project, I wanted you to think about a book cover, because if we're talking about fan fiction, book covers and the aesthetics of book covers really have a weight to them, right? This feels like legitimate fan fiction. This feels like legitimate literature. And it's because it abides by the aesthetics of books, okay? So again, just because, going back to the bad example, right? Just because it looks like a book doesn't mean it's good. So you have to have a simple message, right? You have to know the genre that you're engaging with, right? If it's a sci-fi, it has a specific genre. If it's Star Wars, right, it usually has a ton of characters on the front. So think about your audience and your message when you're composing these book covers. So I'm really excited to see what you come up with. Please feel free to also post them to our Instagram page. I know I made a message yesterday about how you can get extra credit for each Instagram post, up to 2 posts. And so you can post your book cover to the Instagram if you want, for some extra credit. Again, you don't have to do it if you don't want to, but I've really enjoyed the engagement on forums so far. Y'all have this week done an amazing job with finding some of those cases where copyright is a little fuzzy. Your assignments yesterday, I've been reading through them. They're really, really good and really engaging. So y'all have been doing a really good job. So I'm very excited to see what you do with this assignment. Thank you. Have a great weekend.